So in next class, we're going to look at this question. So this is a source-free resistor inductor problem. So the difference between what we've done so far and this problem is that now we have two inductors which are connected in our circuit. And then we want to see how we are going to deal with such a problem. So it's nothing too complex. It's actually an interesting problem. Let's see how we're going to approach it. It has 5 parts. Let's see how it starts. So the question starts with the description of what the circuit is. So they're saying that the two switches in the circuit are thrown simultaneously at t is equals to 0. And then they want us to find two things for a start. The current I1 for t 0 from the right, as in just 0 going upwards. And then also current I2 starting from t0, t is equals to 0 going upwards, as in just the, in other words, the current just when the switch is thrown. So how do we do that? Well, the assumption here that we start with is that the switch has been left closed for quite some time. So we first start by evaluating what was happening when time was less than 0. So let's analyze what was happening when time was less than 0. In this case, if time is less than 0, it means that this switch is closed and this switch is also closed, implying that the circuits in play are going to have this root here as a complete root, and then we're also going to have this root here also being complete. But what I want you guys now to answer is, or what I want you guys to try out is, if the switches are closed, if both switches are actually closed in this case, what will be the behavior of our inductors? What would they do? How would they behave? What do you guys think? What would be the behavior or the effect of the inductor to our circuit if the switch is closed here? Can you guys guess? Okay, so the voltage is equals to 0. Okay, so basically what happens here is that if the switch is closed here, so now we have a power source in play. What will happen is that these inductors will behave as if they are shorts to our circuit. So what they will do is they'll behave as if they are short circuit. So we'll short circuit them out as if they are not even there. And then let's see what happens. So I will now redraw the circuit without the inductors, and I'll replace the inductors with only short circuits. So what happens there is, for time less than 0, our circuit is going to look like this. So we have this resistor here, that 3 ohm resistor, and then it comes down, and then where we had this inductor, this is just going to be a short circuit. And then this line, of course, goes all the way to the other side. We have the power source here. And then what else? Okay, yeah, I've closed the switch there. So I've just drawn one line all the way up to the resistor here, the 3 ohm resistor. And then this side again, I have that other resistor. This is a 12 ohm resistor. The switch is closed there. So this goes all the way the other side. But again, we had an inductor here. This will act as a short circuit. So we have that there. And then we have finally the other resistor this side. Okay. So yes, just as you mentioned, there'll be no drop across the inductor. Current will just be passing through, so that is a short circuit. So this is a 6 ohm resistor. And then we have that's 12 and 3 ohms. Then we have 12 volts supply. Okay, so this is the circuit that we now have. But remember the notation. In this branch, we have current I1. So here we're going to have current I1. And then this is going downwards, of course. And in this branch, if you look at the diagram again, we have I2 there. And lastly, in this branch, through that 6 ohm resistor, we have I. Okay, so in this branch, we have current IT. And this current is labeled to say it's going upwards. Now, from the original diagram, I will assign polarity, then I'm going to stick with it. So the polarity that we're going to have here is for each resistor, of course, that's why I want to assign the polarity. So for this resistor, I'll say the part nearest to the source, I'll label that as positive, and I'll label this as negative. Same thing to the 12, I'll label this part as positive, I'll label this as negative. I think those are the only two resistors. Okay, that's everything. Okay, so this is what we have. So this is our circuit. Now, by observing the circuit that we've drawn for t less than 0, what can you conclude here? So let me ask you, I, the current passing through the 6 ohm resistor. So what would be the value of IT for t less than 0? What would be IT? So IT. So I for t less than 0. What would be this for this circuit? And IT, it's this one here. So what would be the value of the current there when time is equals to 0? Okay. So what I was trying to get from you here is the effect of a short circuit. So you know to say when a short circuit is connected, it literally shuts out a resistor that comes after it. So in this case, that resistor is like it's cut out from this circuit. So there'll be no current that will reach it. So if current was coming in this route from the source in this way, so when it reaches a short circuit here, all the current will prefer to go downwards. No current would take that route. So in this case, we see that that 6 ohm resistor will be shut out. But of course, because we have a resistor here and a resistor here, we do expect some current to also take this route going that way, then coming back here. It's this one that will be shut out. So my point here is for t less than 0, the current through that 6 ohm resistor will also be equals to 0. Okay, so that part is out. Now, what else do we observe right from the start? Well, again, for t less than 0, now we want to determine what this and this one here, what they are going to be for t less than 0. So when time is less than 0, to determine what I1 and what I2, what they are, we're going to use any method really here is going to work, but we're going to use Kirchhoff's voltage law. So we're going to loop around. Doesn't matter, up to you which method you want to use. I will loop around in this manner. So if I was to loop around in that manner, so for this loop here, we observe that this part is minus, and this part here is positive. So I start this loop. I find the source at its negative most point. That is going to be minus 12. And when I continue, I find the resistor. So this resistor, I think I did assign polarity somewhere here. It was positive first, then minus there. So it's positive first, then minus there. So I find it at its positive part, so it will be the resistance 3 multiplying the current through it. The current through it is the same as this one here. So it's I1. So this is going to be plus 3I1. So they are the only two components in the circuit. So this is what is going to be equals to 0 by KVL. So from here, we can easily work out what I1 is. So get I1 being equals to 12 over 3. From here, this becomes I1 is equals to 4 amps. Now, this becomes the value of the current through that branch immediately when the switch is going to be thrown. So for T0 going upwards, this is going to be the starting point. So this is going to be 4 amps. Is that okay? So we found it when the switch was on. So when the switch is closed, that's the current that will be playing around in this loop. So when the switch is now switched off, what you have to see is that this is the current that will be flowing here. Perhaps the only thing is what will be its direction now. But otherwise, this is the current that will be present in this line immediately when the switch is opened, yes. Okay, so we have found what I1 is. That's what they were looking for. But they were looking for two things. It was I1 first and now I2. So I2 is this side. So again, we are now going to use Kirchhoff's voltage law on the other loop. So again, it's up to us how we want to loop around this. So this is positive again. This is minus. I chose to loop in this way. I can still maintain the same orientation to go in this way. If I did that, I find the 12 ohms at its minus point first. So I can say minus 12. The current through the current through the 12 ohms is I2. So I'll say minus 12 times I2. And then I find the voltage source at its positive part. So I'm going to have plus there, and that is 12 volts. They're the only two components, so this is going to be equals to 0. And if you make I2 the subject, you're going to have 12 over 12, and this is going to give you 1 amp. So again, this is the current that is flowing through. This is the current that is flowing through that loop when the switch is still closed. So it's the one that we will start with just at T is equals to 0, going upwards, when the switch is going to be opened. This is the current that will be available. So this is the current that they were looking for there. So I2 for T0 going upwards, that's the current there, 1 amp. Okay, so any questions there? That sorts out the first two, or the first one. Any questions here? Go ahead.
I'd like to take it back just a bit.
To where? How I drew the circuit.
How you review it with
Okay.
how you look out the short circuit.
Okay. So the thing is, when the switch, let's say this switch is closed, even this one here, it's closed. Let's say it's in this orientation. What happens is this line is literally not there. That line is not there. So in this way, the statement I made here was that for as long as the power source is connected, the two inductors will behave as if they are shorts. So they'll behave as if they are short circuits. So because of that, again, these two will behave as if they are not there. Instead, what we have is just a connecting line. So let me black out the other one as well. So this will also behave as if it's not there. Instead, we only have a short circuit there. So let's put short circuits there. Okay, so we have short circuits. Okay, so here we're only going to have a short circuit. Even here, we're only going to have a short circuit. So how you draw it in terms of how these lines are going to be and so on, that's now up to you. But the key thing is that this is a short circuit and this is a short circuit. Have you seen that?
But why do they behave?
Why
They
do
behave like they're not there?
why do they behave as if they are not there? I think it's something that we looked at when we were introducing inductors. I think just the source-free inductor resistor circuits. We saw how the inductors work. They power up charge. It's the nature of an inductor. When the resistor is, how do I explain? I think the best is I'll just give you the recording to the previous class. Perhaps you can look at that. But when this is connected, the inductor behaves as a short circuit. And then once you remove the source, then the inductor will start discharging. So you have two things. You really have to know the behavior when it is connected for an inductor and also for a capacitor, because they'll be key when it comes to actually approaching these questions. Is that okay?
That's fine. And the last question is how you assign the polarity again.
Okay.
Just
for polarity, it's up to you really. It's the same concepts that we've been using throughout these topics. The polarity across a resistor is completely up to you, whether as in the part which is going to be positive or negative, especially in a case where you have multiple sources. In this case, the only thing that I always say is once you assign polarity, stick to it throughout until when you're done with the problem. So here I just chose, because I know if I have a power source like this, so I have something like this. So if I have a power source like this, I know it will be positive here and minus here. So because of that, if a resistor is connected nearest to the positive part, I expect that this part is also going to be positive, then that is going to be negative. So my assumption was that this nearest to the positive end of the power source was going to be positive. Same thing for this part. Then this was minus and that was minus. Is that okay? Yeah. For a current source or something, if current is predicted to flow in a certain direction across a component, you should know to say in a resistor, current will flow from where? Is it positive to negative or negative to positive in a resistor? What do you guys think?
Positive to negative.
Yeah, so if it is current is labeled to flow in this direction, then it is only convenient for you to say this is the positive end and this is the negative end. Okay, so yeah, basically that is that. So that answers the first part. Let's look at the second part. In the second part, what do they want us to find? Now they're saying that find L equivalent. Sorry. So now we are looking for the equivalent, L equivalent. What do you think they mean when they say LEQ at the bottom there? What are we looking for there? What are they looking for?
The inductor equivalent.
Yes, more like the effective inductance due to the two inductors present. Now, this is at T, they actually specify, no, we're not yet there, we're here. They specify here for T greater than 0. So what is happening here? T is greater than 0. So let's see. If T is greater than 0, remember what happened? The switch now is being thrown. So if the switch is going to be thrown at T is equals to 0, what is happening? This is now opened here. Instead, now it is connected the other side. So I'll remove it from this contact. And now I'll say the both switches, they are connected instead of going there. Now these two, this one connects here and this one connects here. So this is now what we're seeing. So what happens? Notice that this entire line now has been rendered more like redundant. It's not doing anything anymore. So this is why we're saying these are source free. When the switch was down, there was a source in the circuit, but now the switch is thrown the other way. Now the source has been cut out from the circuit, and our circuit now becomes a source free circuit. So let's see when we black out those resistors or those lines. So now we basically just remove these connections and say, okay, these are now not doing anything to our circuit. So let's color them out. So look at the circuit that is now left. So even when it comes to redrawing this, I will just redraw it without that line. So this is the system that I will actually be drawing, and notice that it will actually just not have that part. So let's see how will it look like. So if I look at components, I only have this, but with the source gone, the inductors are back. The inductors now, they're more like the big dogs of the circuit. So they now own what is happening here. So let's try to redraw our circuit with the power source gone. So again, with the power source gone, the inductors are back in action. Whatever they were storing, now they'll start spitting it out. So the power source is out, so I won't include it. And then at the far end here, we had that resistor. So the resistor is here. And this was a 6 ohm resistor. And somewhere here we had the second inductor. So this is what we have here. Now observe that the two switches, one was somewhere here, one was somewhere here, but because they are closed, I can just leave these as just connecting lines. The power source was also somewhere here, but because it's now not complete, not connecting anywhere, it's as good as it's just not there. Then along this branch, this is where we had I1. Along this branch, this is where we had I2. And going in this way, this is where we had I. So let's bring the inductance of the two. This is 3 Henry, and then this is 6 Henrys. So this is our circuit now. Now, what we have to do is to calculate the effective resistance of our circuit. Now, how do we do that? Now, how do you combine inductors when they are connected in parallel? Well, one thing that I'll just say here is the way you connect inductors or the way you combine inductors, it's the same as the way you combine resistors. Have you got that? Suppose you had two resistors in parallel. How would you combine them to get the effective resistance? How would you combine the resistors?
When they're in parallel,
Yeah.
you just multiply them, then add the sum.
Yeah, so it's that part where we say 1 over the total resistance is equals to 1 over the first plus 1 over the second, and so on until when you have everything. So it's basically 1 over the total inductance or the equivalent inductance equals to 1 over the inductance of the first one plus 1 over the inductance of the second, and so on. But in this case, we are only looking for 2. So the 2, of course, when you simplify this, this is the one that now becomes L1 times L2 over L1 plus L2. In other words, here I am saying that if you had two inductors connected in parallel, to get the total inductance or the effective inductance, you combine them the same way you would have combined resistors in parallel. Okay, so because of that, in this case, these inductors, it's 3 and a 6. So we're going to have 3 by 6 divided by 3 plus 6. So this is going to be 18 here, divided by, this is going to be 9. So you have 2 henries. So that becomes the inductance. So that answers the second part. So, okay, just answers the first part of the second part. So the next part is tau there. So tau, of course, is the time constant. And all you have to remember is what the expression for the time constant is going to be. So for the time constant, we know to say the time constant is equals to the equivalent, or let's say the inductance over the resistance. So this is how we get the time constant. But how about in our case? How are we going to get the time constant? What do you guys think? Or when you look at our circuit here, we can look at even this one here, or we can look at this one. How are we going to get the time constant? We have two inductors. Are we going to say we'll get the time constant for the first one and then get the time constant for the second one and then try to puzzle out how we combine these two time constants, or what? Well, what you have to see here is we combined our inductors into one inductor. So let's just see them as one inductor. So we combined those two inductors so that now we are only viewing them as one inductor. And this side, we have this one. Because of that, all we have to worry about is the effective inductance and the resistance viewed from the terminals of the inductor. Because we only have one resistor, so it implies that the equivalent resistance of our circuit will basically be just 6 ohms. And the inductance here, L, is going to be 2 henries. In other words, we're going to use the equivalent inductance. So that to calculate the time constant, we're going to say the inductance divided by the resistance viewed from the terminals of the inductor. So that from here, we have the inductor, which is 2, divided by the resistance, which is 6. So this gives us 1/3 seconds. Is that okay? Okay, so that concludes the second part. Now we move on to the third. And what do they want for the third part? Well, for the third part, what do we have? They're saying write IT. So they want a general function for IT for time greater than 0. So we saw when time was less than 0, IT was also 0. But now we're saying for time greater than 0, how are we going to compute for IT? This is what we want to actually find. So how do we do that? Okay, so let's begin. We know the general expression for IT to say the current for a source-free circuit, RL circuit. We know to say IT, the expression for IT will be equals to I0, the current that will be flowing initially just, or let me say, just when the circuit is opened. So don't take this to be the current for time less than 0. This is the current just when the circuit is opened. So then multiplying the exponent of minus t over the time constant. Now, for us to complete this equation, we just need to figure out one thing. We already know what the time constant is. We did find it in the previous step. It was this one. The only thing missing is what I0 is, or the initial current just when the switch was thrown. So how are we going to find this? What do you guys think? Anyone?
You did find that in the first question, found two of them, I1 and I2.
Okay, yeah, you are actually right. When we first did these calculations, we did find what I1 and I2, what they are. So the only thing that is going to happen now is we kind of have to just bring them back here. So what happens is when we had two of them, let me use the free body diagram that we drew, this one here. So now the switch is being closed, or the switch is opened or thrown the other way. Upon doing that, the current that will be flowing in this, just when we just throw the switch, what will happen is that the current that will be flowing here, going in this direction, is going to be I1. And we found I1 as 4. What was that for? I1 was found to be, where is that? I think somewhere here. So we found this as 4 amps. So because of that, we're just going to say, okay, this is 4 amps when we just start, and I2, we started with 1 amp. So since these two are in parallel, how do they combine to give us I1 there? So we know to say, since they are in parallel, we can even use the junction law to say the current entering the junction, which is IT, will be equals to the current leaving the junction, I1 plus I2. So that in the end, we're just summing 4 plus 1, giving us 5 amps. So now that we have the initial current that was flowing, which is I0, which is 5 amps, we can now write the expression that we want. So that we can say, let's see. Yeah, we can now write this. Okay, yeah. So we can now say IT is equals to what we started with, which is 5 amps, then the exponent of minus t over the time constant. Remember that was 1 over 3. So if we simplify this, this becomes 5 e to the power minus 3t. So this is what we have. And of course, the units, this is current, so we have the amps there. Okay, so any questions there?
Good question. So when they ask for I equal to 0, so meaning they're asking for the initial current when this source, when the power source was connected.
It's
the initial, like the starting point.
Yeah, I want to be very careful in answering that question. I want to be very, very careful there, because you have to see it. There are 3 things involved. Let me say there are actually 2 states which are possible. We have t less than 0, and then we have t greater than 0. If we compare I1, for example, let's not I1, just I. If we look at I, for example, for I, when t is less than 0, it means that the switch is open, or let's say this, the source is present. And when the source is present, I1 is, nothing is flowing there. I1 will be equals to 0. But when we look at I, this by the way, I have to say, since we're looking for t less than 0, I can say for t less than 0. So this is going to be equals to 0. But when they say for t equals to 0, this is now them saying that the switch has just been thrown the other way, meaning the source has just been shut out. Have you got that? So it's the same thing saying t is equals to 0 or t, and then they put 0 from the right. So meaning this is literally from 0 going upwards. When you have 0 minus, this is 0 going downwards. This is while the switch was still with the source. You get that? Have I answered that question? Okay. So now we can move on to part 4. So what is happening in part 4? In part 4 now they're saying find I1 and I2. To find I1 and I2, it is necessary to include a possible constant present in the inductive loop. This may be done by finding the voltage across the 6 ohm resistor, which is the voltage across each coil, and integrating the inductor voltage to find the current. The unknown initial value is used as the constant of integration. Find I1 and I2. They actually spelled out what they wanted us to do. So they're saying, let me just highlight what we're going to do first. They're saying, this is done by finding the voltage across the 6 ohm resistor. So we want to start with that one, the voltage across the 6 ohm resistor. So how do we find that? So again, observe that this is happening while the switch is the other way, the source is out. So how do we find the voltage across the 6? So let's find the voltage across the 6. Okay, so let's begin there. This is number 4. So the voltage across 6 ohms. So how do we find voltage? Well, in this case, what you have to observe is for this circuit, if the voltage across this inductor is V1, and the voltage, perhaps let me use so that they can stand out. The voltage across this inductor is V1, and the voltage across this inductor is V2. How do these two voltage values compare? What do you expect? How will those two voltage values compare? V1 and V2. Firstly, you have to see that they are connected in parallel to each other. Because of that, what you expect is that the potential difference in this way will have to be the same as the potential difference viewed in that way. And to know what the potential difference across these two, all you have to know is the potential difference across this one. So if we can find the potential across the 6 ohm resistor, then we can compare it to the potential across V1 and V2. Have you seen that? Did you get that?
Well, can you just explain again?
Okay. So what we have here is this point here. So this point, we have this resistor. So you have this resistor. This is a 6 ohm resistor. So, and for the 6 ohm resistor, remember we have found an expression for I at any time t. So what this means is we can find an expression for the voltage drop across that resistor. But because this resistor is connected in parallel to these 2 points, here we have an inductor. the voltage drop across this resistor will have to be the same as the voltage drop across that inductor, because the two are connected in parallel. When the second inductor is connected also in parallel to the other two, this inductor and that resistor, also observe that because they are in parallel, it means that the voltage across the 6 is the same as the voltage across the other inductor, and it will also be the same as the voltage across the second inductor because they are in parallel. Again, I'll say view them as if they were resistors. View them as if they were resistors. But now the voltage drop across the 6 ohm, let's say that is 30 volts. If this is 30 volts, and then you have this resistor, let's say this is a resistor, what you see here is the drop across the resistor R1 here is going to be equal to 30 volts. But since this resistor is also in parallel to the R1 and also to the 30 volts, we expect the voltage drop across R2 to also be 30 volts. So these are expected to be the same. Have you got that now?
Yes.
Okay. So based on that logic, all we actually need is to find an expression for the voltage drop across the 6 ohm. This is actually what this question was spelling out for us. They said, first, find the voltage drop across the 6 ohms. So how do we find the voltage drop across the 6 ohms? So the voltage across the 6, I'll say that is V6. This is going to be equal to the current times resistance. So the resistance is 6 ohms. The current is IT. Again, I'm using the general expression for the current. So this, we know what the expression for the current is going to be. VIT, not VIT, IT, which is the current at any time t. We saw in the previous calculation that it was e to the minus 3t. So this is what we're going to use here. When we substitute, we now have 6 by 5, then we have e to the minus 3t. Doing this means that we get 30, and then we have e minus 3t. This becomes the expression for the voltage drop across the 6 ohm resistor. Now, how about for I1? Well, I1, it's a little bit tricky. Why? Because we have the inductors present. Those are now, they're now inductors. We know to say the voltage values, they will be equal based from the previous calculations. The voltage drop across the first inductor will be equals to the voltage drop across the second inductor, which will also be equals to what V6 is. And we just found V6 as this. But what becomes tricky is relating these voltage values to the current. Because remember, the question is not asking for V1 and V2. The question is asking us to find I1 and I2. But our observation is that V1 and V2 will be the same as the voltage across the 6. So we now have the voltage across the 6, which is the same as V1 and V2. But how do we use those voltage values to find I1 and I2? So again, using their statement, they're saying first find the voltage across the 6, which is the voltage across each coil. Do you see that? They actually pointed it out for us. The voltage across the 6 ohms is also the voltage across each coil. Each coil here meant each inductor. Now, after doing that, what else is here? Integrating the inductor voltage, see this? They're saying integrate the inductor voltage to find the current. Let's see, why are they saying this? Well, when we introduced source-free resistor inductor circuits, we did come up with one equation that related current, inductance, and voltage. So if you recall, we saw an equation where we had the current I, IT, this current was equal to 1 over the inductance, then integrating the voltage with respect to time. Do you remember this equation? We looked at this, I think, when we introduced the inductors as well. We derived a number of equations. This was among the equations that we derived. Now, for I1, let's say if we wanted to find I1, all we need for I1 is the voltage across I1. So this becomes the inductance of I1. And then how are we integrating this? It's from when the switch is turned the other way until when we are actually observing it. So it is from 0 to T. And then the voltage becomes the voltage drop across I1, then multiplying dt. This is why we needed to find the voltage drop across I1, or across each of these inductors. So it will be the same thing even for the other inductor. Is that okay? Because of this,
sorry.
yeah.
You mentioned means we were using the integration formula for.
Why we're using what?
The formula. What are you trying to find?
We're trying to find I1. And this is one formula that we looked at. I think we did derive this equation when we just introduced source-free RL circuits. So we found what the voltage V1 was earlier. So now we want to use this voltage to find what I1. Remember, the question is actually asking us to find I1 and I2 here. So they want us to find I1 and I2. So having found what the voltage across V1 is, we can now use that voltage in this integral to find what I1 is. Have you got that?
Okay.
Yeah. So now let's proceed. So we know the inductance of L1, that is just 1 over 3. And then we have, this is from 0 to T, we're keeping it general. And then we did find the expression for V1. We said V1 was the same as V6, that is 30 e to the minus 3t. So I have 30 e to the minus 3t. And then we have to integrate this with respect to t. So let's do the math there. When you perform the integral, first the 3 and the 30 will reduce. We'll simplify. We have 10 here, 0 to t, e to the minus 3t dt. Now we can integrate. So integrating this with respect to t, we have 10. And then this will give us a minus 3 down here, 1 over 3. And then e to the minus 3t. Again, this is from 0 to t. But the constant, what you have to get here is, if you read the statement again, they say, and integrating the inductor voltage to find the current, the unknown initial value, or the known, not the unknown, sorry. The known initial value is used as the constant of integration. So we're taking this as general. Even we can actually say, if we want to justify that constant of integration, we can actually do this even without those limits, but still fine. All we're saying here is we're going to have a constant present here, and that constant will be the known value for the current present when we just started. And remember the current present for the first inductor, L1, the current initially there for t less than 0 was 4 amps. So that will be the constant of integration for this one. Have you got that?
Oh, can you please repeat?
Okay. To help you picture it, let me just, I can even do it without the limits. perhaps that might be better. If I was to do this without the limits, we have 10 here, and then we are integrating, this becomes e to the minus 3t dt, and then this becomes 10, and then we have, this is 1 over 3 with the minus, then e to the minus 3t. Now, after integrating, you know you're going to put plus c, right? That's okay. You get this part, right? Plus c.
Yes.
C here is the constant of integration. Now, going back to the question, what are they saying? You see, they are saying this part. What's the last part here? The statement says, integrating the inductor voltage, which is what we just did there, to find the current. The unknown, this is what we're looking at. The unknown, the known, I keep saying the unknown, sorry. The known initial value is used as the constant of integration. So the known initial current value for I1, the known initial current value was 4 amps. This was the known initial current value. So this is what we'll be taking as the constant of integration for this part. Have you got that? What that implies is, since we have integrated, we have a constant of integration. But that statement is telling us that the constant of integration is actually the initial current we had for that inductor. And the initial current here is I1 for t less than 0. And remember what I1 for t less than 0 was? We found it earlier on. For t less than 0, I1 was 4 amps. So where we have that part, that constant of integration, we're going to put 4 amps. Have you got it now? So all you have to do now is simplify. But of course, what I'm saying here is, even though we have this constant in play, you still are looking at this changing from when time was 0 to when you're observing it at t. Even here, so I'll say from 0 to t, but we still have a constant present. That's why the statement starts by saying what here? They're saying that it is necessary to include a possible constant present in the inductive loop. That is what constant they're talking about there. So all we have to do now is simplify this part, then we'll be done. So of course, when you plug in the limits, I can bring in that 10 inside. This becomes minus 10 over 3. And then let's bring in what this is. We're going to have, for the first one, I can just do it like this. This is going to be e to the minus 3t minus, okay, I have left out that negative outside, so I'll say minus. Now where there's t, I'll put 0, this will be e to the power 0. Then we still have that plus 4 outside. So when I expand this, what I now have is minus 10 e to the minus 3t over 3, and the second part is going to be plus, and then this is just going to be 10 over 3. Okay, have I left something here? Okay, I feel like I've left something. Okay, there's a negative, I think, that I have left out. Okay, I think there's one thing that I've left. Let me just try to see why it actually comes in. Yeah, but I've left out something. That's a minus, which has to be here. That minus will affect a few things. It will change what is positive. So yeah, this becomes positive here. And this will be positive, and this will be the -1 on the middle. And then this will still be the 4 here. Okay, so yeah, I left out that minus somewhere there. Okay, so yeah, just combine these two. Combine those two. Those are like terms, so you can add them up. And then this is over 3. So you have minus, let's see, I can write this actually as +4 if you don't want that minus to confuse you. Then this is over 3. So let's combine this. Common denominator 3, 1 into 3, 3 by that, that's 12. So this is 12 minus 10. And then this is going to be a 2 there. So this will just be 2 over 3. So this part is 2 over 3. Is that okay there? Okay. So having finished that one, the last part is to find I2. I2 can be found in the same fashion. I2 can be found in the same fashion. The only difference now is we'll just be using L2. So this is going to be 1 over L2, the integral. And then we have this is from 0 to t of V2. And then this is, yeah, V2. And just write it V2 dt. Okay, so basically this is how we're going to approach it. So you can integrate this again in the same way. Don't forget, once you integrate, you have to add that constant of integration. And for this one, the constant of integration is going to be 1 amp. The current which was present when we just started. So try to see if you can work it out and find I2. Find I2 as, I think I found 5.5 over 3 e to the minus 3t minus 2 over 3 amps. So see if you can find this one like that. Is that okay?